I'm here today with Rachel Blechman of Ventum, and we're going to ask her about how her bikes are going and where she thinks we're going in the future with this. Rachel, nice to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
So, I guess my first question is, you're in a partnership with Ironman for the last couple of years, and you're your official bike course sponsor. How has that kind of helped your business?
Yeah. So the partnership with Ironman is an interesting one. Obviously, we started in 2016, and we were only the Kona bike course sponsor. And I think at the time, everyone looked at it as they said, "Oh, here's another small boutique brand. They're looking to try and make a splash." But no one really saw what the vision of what it could be. And I guess it was a fortunate time for us in that Ironman was going through a bit of a transition period. They were very much open to new ideas. They were very much open up to changing the playbook and trying something new. And I think that's where the partnership started between Ventum CEO Dean Noor and the Ironman leadership team is we came in and we said, look, we're different from other brands. We don't operate like other brands. So the relationship that we want to hold with Ironman needs to be completely different. And that really set us up to do 2016 differently. We carried that over to 2017 as the core sponsor for Kona again. And then we realized that there was definitely an opportunity to do something bigger with Ironman. We had capabilities as a smaller, more flexible brand, but also as one that's very technology facing and wanting that growth and to get to the next higher level, that we could collaborate with Ironman to become their first official global bike partner that they'd ever had. So they've never had a global bike partner before. And the way that it happened is we found the value in Ironman helping to legitimize our brand. And we helped Ironman embrace new technology and embrace a new era, I would say, of triathlon racing. So, in the beginning, people would look at a non-traditional bike, like the Ventum behind me. They would look at it and they would say, it's cool and it's interesting, but what happens if triathlon bans it like the UCI did? Back in the 90s with the Lugano charter, you saw Chris Boardman riding U-shaped frames, but they were made out of washing machine parts. Those were not bikes that could be mass produced. They didn't have the manufacturing know-how. They couldn't make it so that it could be safe for the masses. And what happens is over time and development of technology, trickle down technology from the military, manufacturing processes that we can play around with, obviously there's a bigger story to be told about, Ventum's development and where the Z-shaped frame comes from and the integrated, excuse me for 1 second. My apologies about that. That was Bear Brennan, our CFO. Well, we can clip that, okay. So just going back into it, there's a lot of development that went into creating Ventum that gave us the ability to say, look, this is why Ventum is different than other brands, even other smaller boutique brands. But there was still kind of that general understanding that non-traditional bikes were always kind of hinging on, maybe they'll be allowed, but I might get to a race, an official could come up to me and say, your bike's not legal for this event according to the UCI charters, and we chose to adhere to that. So with the strategic partnership with Ironman, they were willing to say, hey, we understand that there are benefits that athletes will find in non-traditional frames. There are benefits that athletes will find in semi-customizable build options. There are, definite advantages to the aero integrated hydration that we offer. And so they looked at us as helping them move towards the future. And we looked at it and said, well, if we're the official bike partner of Ironman, they can't ban non-traditional triathlon bikes. Non-traditional is then here to stay. And so I really think that the Ironman relationship has not only cemented Ventum as a brand, but the impact that it has allowed for other non-traditional companies to come forward and really be able to push that technology and say, look, this is why this one is important, or this is why this is important, is because we've set a standard of being able to say, this is the stress and deflect testing that you should be going through. here are the manufacturing process and composites that allow us to make these changes. You know, we can put our bikes through stress and safety, all of the deflect testing, and we actually did end up going, kind of on a tangent here, but we did end up going to the ITU triathlon long course nationals, and they originally said, you know, we adhere by UCI legal rules. We can't allow Ventum bikes to be raced because they don't adhere to the geometries and the double diamond and this and that and the other thing. We said we had the opportunity to prove that it is a safe bike and that it does do every single thing that you need it to do. And they said, okay. And so we came out with our presentations and you know, we created the bike with the knowledge that all of these items would have to be hurdles that we would get through in the future. And so when we presented it to them, they actually accepted it. And so we were a part of changing that history to say, look, you can have non-traditional bikes in all levels of triathlon as long as you do X, Y, and Z to make sure that the safety of our athletes comes first. So, bit of a long-winded explanation there, but I think that there's definitely a massive benefit that we've had from the Ironman relationship that's allowed us to grow and develop further. But I also like to think that we've helped clear a path to say, if you have an idea and if you can do it properly, the triathlon community is ready to welcome it.
So what is your relationship like with the new ownership?
The relationship, well, are you talking about how Ironman was just sold and a new? So what I will say is that Ironman has done a remarkable job of keeping the interests separate. And what I mean by that is they are constantly looking to how they can grow and make processes smoother and make the experiences, you know, a baseline of awesome and then keep raising it up. And that's from the athlete experience side over to the partnership side. So what I'd say is that we haven't actually had a lot of change in our relationship, even with the different acquisitions. Andrew Messick and the leadership team, as well as everybody who's come in over the last few years to develop the athlete experience side, the marketing side, the communication side, and the partnership relationships, they have worked to create programs that really continue on, regardless of what mayhem is going on.
Now, I tend to race a lot, and obviously I peruse the transition area for bikes. I've only seen one Ventum there that happened to be a pros, and I only know one other person that has one, and they happen to get it from a pro. How do you kind of plan on expanding into the market where everybody else is?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the big question, isn't it? I mean, you can look at it in a couple of different ways, which is you can go extremely aggressive, trying to go after athletes and trying to say, this is the bike for you, this is the bike for you. We've taken a little bit different approach, which is showing how we can create something different and then individually working with almost every single athlete that, you know, we have exposure to. So while we are a direct consumer brand, we take an extremely hands-on approach. And we really look to say, is this the right bike for you as an athlete? That might lead to slower growth over the years, but I think that you are definitely seeing more growth over the years, you know, as you've seen from the Kona count, you know, year over year in different varieties. But we've always looked at to say, how do we come up with the best products that we can? How do we get to know our athletes? And then how do we make it applicable to them? So earlier on, we had a price point of, you know, somewhere in the range of $8,000 to $12,000, and that was all you got. It was an extremely high-end bike. It was an extremely high-end build, and you still have the options to make that jump, but of course it limits the athletes who have that possibility to. So as we've grown as a company, we are able to obviously order in higher quantities, create better relationships with our suppliers, work on different developmental processes that will allow us to eventually start to bring our pricing lower and to show the different compatibilities that are available with Ventum. So most recently, the best example of this is that we've completely respec'd our entry-level line. So we started offering what's considered the Ventum Z mechanical. So our price range right now is starting at $2,699 for a complete build. That's with 105 components, profile design handlebars, vision alloy wheels, but you're still getting all of the major benefits of the Ventum bikes. The Z-shaped frame, the integrated hydration, the hands-on athlete experience. So while you can go to a race and say, oh, I only see a handful of Ventums, when you talk to every single one of those Ventum athletes, each and every one of them should be over the moon, not just about their experience purchasing the bike, but they're experiencing with the support, you know, from the time they got it to seeing that athlete at a race to working with the Ventum team and our mechanics that are there. So those are the areas that we're really working on developing. And from there, I think that we'll definitely see the volume grow. But again, the focus being, is this the right bike for that athlete at the point that their, you know, spouse isn't going to kick them out of the house?
Mm-hmm. Now, how is it? How have all these races being postponed or canceled affected you guys?
It's an interesting question because we definitely are impacted by not having that face-to-face customer interaction. You know, it hurts not being able to see a lot of the athletes. It hurts not being able to get the content and do a lot of our activations that we work on with Ironman and that we spent, well, the whole last off season planning for. I will say that there is still a need for bicycles, not just for racing, not just for training, but for sanity. And as employees of the company, I mean, we're seeing that more than anybody else. I mean, every single employee here is out riding every single day just to try and get to the next day. What I think that this has afforded us is, you know, we have the ability to get creative. I mean, we've come out with some crazy opportunities. Like we did a stimulus package where anyone who purchased a Ventum bike received a 10% discount and a free trainer. We came out with a like a My Ventum My Way custom paint design contest that we just finished today. So we've been impacted by having no events, but we can't forget that every single person out there is impacted by not being able to go to events. Athletes' motivation is low right now. They're trying to find ways to continue training or reasons to continue training if they have no races to get to. For some athletes, that motivation is, oh, I'm not spending money on 4 different races. Maybe I should go out and get a bike so that when I can race again, it's time to go. What we've really chosen to focus on is just that community building aspect. How can we bring people together? How can we encourage them to keep training, whether it's inside and alone or you can get outside, you know, and not cause any problems. But our impact for this year isn't going to be how many bikes we've sold. It's how many people that we've inspired. That'll pay off in dividends in the future because that's what we're looking to build as an experience.
Yeah, I happened to see a couple of those paint jobs show up on my Instagram feed, and I know how to reproduce them with Photoshop, but they seem really hard to actually have to do with an airbrush. I mean, do you have a specific person that does all this?
We have 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, do all your components, the bikes are assembled in the United States in your Utah facility?
Right here in this headquarters. That's the banging around you hear behind me.
I mean, not all the components are made in the US though, right?
No, so we have 47 different suppliers from, you know, Shimano in Japan coming to their North American set. You know, we have Envy up in Ogden, Utah, join us. We have, you know, obviously the frames are made overseas with our oversight. So we have 47 different suppliers that we work with. Everything comes here to Utah. It enters through our headquarters. We've been fortunate enough to double our staff in the past year with the move to Utah. And so everything that comes through these doors is inspected, QC'd, and then each bike is built up from hand. So every single time a bike order comes in, one of our mechanics goes, they get the frame, the fork, the fairing, the handlebars, the chosen crank arm length, the chosen bottle color. And it's, you know, it's a logistical miracle to pull off a move like we did last summer in the middle of July in some of the busiest time of the season and continue to be able to push out bikes and complete sales within the allocated times that we offered. So it's something that we feel very strongly about, is that every single bike that comes through our doors and that leaves our doors is checked over by multiple people. And it's built with care. So we include like a little postcard in there that the specific mechanic who built the bike from start to finish signs, and it has a picture of them on it. You know,
Nice.
I think one of them has a crazy handlebar mustache in there. So if you got one of those.
So I don't know how much of your products come from China, but how do you anticipate the supply chain being affected in the event that the president sanctions China over the coronavirus, as he's been talking about? Do you have any plans for if that happens, or what it might affect you?
Well, the interesting part is that if it affects us, it will affect other brands more so. What I mean by that is everybody in the bike industry, and not just the bike industry, I mean, air conditioning companies, car industry, everybody across the board is going to feel the pressure for something like that. And I think that's where the safety in it lies is, you know, I'm not naive as to think like, oh, nothing could happen. It absolutely can. But I think there is something to be said that there's a foresight to understanding what potentially could be out there. The bike industry began hurting from COVID-19 in December. You know, before it was even a concern in the US as to health and wellness and, you know, potentially shutting down the economy and people's livelihoods, the bike industry was feeling backlash from not being able to get supplies and to knowing that there was something out there that was directly impacting our economy. So the bad news is that it could absolutely happen more so, and it could happen again. The good news is we've already started to kind of bypass a few of those hurdles and hopefully plan ahead for if there are major changes in the future. I think that what we're seeing right now is that our suppliers from overseas are starting to come back up and running. A lot of it depends on the relationship that you have with your suppliers. You know, are you a person and a company that contacts solely virtually? Or have you taken the time to go in and make sure that you're meeting the people and you're shaking the right hands and you're creating these relationships? Because at the end of the day, that's the difference from what, you know, what's going to be something bumped down in a list like, oh, we can do that later, to no, you know what, we really want to work well with these people. So I think that the bike industry is going to continue hurting. I think every industry is going to continue hurting, but there are ways that you can mitigate this that can allow for a successful future and allow you to continue producing bikes the way that they should be produced.
Now, what are the sales like for your annual sales like for the Ventum 1 and the Ventum Z? Is the Ventum Z kind of picking up steam now that you have it's a lower price point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Ventum Z has definitely overtaken the Ventum 1. You know, and maybe it's a little of a benefit that you get all of the same, you know, the same major benefits that you get from the Ventum 1. So there are a few differences between them, which is that they are two completely different frames. So the Ventum Z does use a slightly different carbon in the layup itself. It makes it a slight bit heavier, not much, it's like 100, 200 grams. So it's not really anything you're gonna notice, but it does help to substantially bring that price point down. You have a different front fork on there. You have third-party handlebars from either 3T or Propel Design. So the Ventum Z, in terms of the price saving, absolutely athletes can connect to that. Someone who originally might have come to us, and this happened to me a few times at expos, you know, people would come up and they would just say, oh, it's a beautiful bike, but I could never afford that. Absolutely can never afford that. You know, to be able to look at somebody and say, well, you know, what do you think the price is? And to be able to come in and say, oh, well, your Specialized was more expensive than that, or the Cervelo that you're racing on, even with the discount you got, that probably costs more than your Ventum. And with the Ventum, you know, the follow-up question there is typically, well, it's too fast for me. You know, I don't need to look that serious. We kind of look at that and we're like, well, do you need hydration? Do you ride your bike on the indoor trainer in the winter? Do you need to be able to change out components to, you know, meet your needs and fit? So there are so many things along the way that the Ventum Z offers at a price point that's very acceptable to athletes, and of course makes it kind of the more natural, oh, you know what, maybe I could start thinking about a non-traditional bike, where athletes might never have considered that before. From there, we do have a number of athletes who look at the lighter weight, more highly integrated, more custom built Ventum 1 and say, you know what, now I'm understanding where that price point comes from. I can justify that spending because it makes sense for my needs. So we definitely have more Ventum Zs out in the wild probably at this point than the Ventum 1. But people don't forget that the Ventum 1 was a flagship. I mean, that is what garnered people's emotions. They looked at it and they said, I either love it, or they looked at it and they said, I hate it. And we've had a lot of people move over from the I hate it range over to I love it.
Yeah, it's definitely different. I mean, you know, even with beam bikes, it's just that the Z-shaped frame is just, it stands out.
Absolutely.
Now, what is it? How successful has the NS1 been? I mean, I know that's probably your latest project.
The NS1 is my baby. The NS1 has been very successful. Part of that, I think, is when it came out. So just around the launch of Kona, as well as our move to Utah, there were a lot of people who were looking for a bike that isn't the choice between have a lightweight bike, can I have an aero road bike? People are starting to get more into gravel and dirt riding because they don't feel safe on the roads. So the NS1, that was a bike that we started playing around with design work on back in 2016. When I say that, you know, the engineering process that went into that, you know, it launched at the end of 2018, but it took years to develop. And the reason for that is our goal is that we are a performance company. We came out in the triathlon scope. We want to absolutely offer the best triathlon bike that we can. And as we get into the road racing sect and into the gravel racing sect and into the mountain biking sect, we aren't going to launch something unless we feel like it is the absolute best that it can be. So with the NS1, we came into it and we immediately said, okay, you have this list of rules that says, you know, here's what the geometry needs to look like, and this is what the weight needs to be. And, you know, here are the things that you can make that are special. And we looked around the industry and obviously noted that there isn't a versatile all-road bike. So we came and said, okay, if we can make a bike that looks like that, and it can be structurally safe, and you can do all of these, you know, different changes with aerodynamics because of the way that we manufacture our carbon, why can't we do something like that with a road bike? And so as we started to play around with the road bike, a lot of it came down into the manufacturing process. Putting in graphene into the resin before it's laid up with the carbon, you know, shaping it so that you have a pure road bike geometry, but you bring the bottom bracket up just a little bit more to make it into closer of a feature of the gravel bike. So all of these items that we started to play around with, we started to find a use for. And that's when it became, okay, this is a bike that an athlete can race a crit on, go climb up a challenge HC, you know, category climb. I did one here in Utah just last Sunday. I didn't throw up, I'm very proud of that. You can take it on a gravel road because you can run 30mm wheels on it. So you can climb it up a mountain, take a gravel road and jump home. You can take it into a road race where you need the aerodynamics. So we found that we had a mixture of opportunities afforded to us from our manufacturing knowledge that allowed us to do something that no other brand was doing. That's when it made sense to come into the road market. And because of that, most anybody who's jumped on and been able to test ride an NS1 has been able to maybe not identify it, but really notice it, that there's a responsiveness, or there's that lightweight feeling that they want to be able to find from their other bike, but they find that they have to balance different bikes against each other. So overall, the response has been overwhelmingly positive. The sales are going well. We actually just launched our new mechanical version of that one. So again, we went with flagship model first and coming out with the absolute best that we can offer. And then really identifying, okay, how can we help get this to more people than just the ones who can afford it? And so, yeah, things are taking off. And especially as we hit summer, we're seeing more and more people out here and around the country riding them.
Now, I went back 5 years, and correct me if I'm wrong, but all your sponsors, pro-sponsored athletes riding a Ventum 1, Ventum 1, there has been no top 10 finishes at Kona. Is that correct?
That is correct.
How do you plan on changing that?
2020 is the, oh wait. The best way that we can hopefully have athletes in the top 10 is to make sure that we are supporting our athletes in the best way possible. That doesn't mean dumping the batch that didn't make it and then signing some new ones that we think we can. But it does mean creating relationships with the athletes that we think have the potential to get there, and putting in the time, the effort, the investment, get them on different product, to keep working with them and take their feedback. I think that's how we're going to get these athletes into the top 10, because I can guarantee we have athletes who have the capability. I'm not going to name them right now just because I think we have a lot of them. I think will do that. But when it comes to athletes getting to the top 10, it has to be such a combination of the right time, the right place, the right physical fitness, the right mindset, the right support. And that's not just a formula that you develop overnight. The fact that we've had athletes with us from the beginning all the way through now who still are qualifying for Kona, fighting for that podium, that's where we're going to find the athletes who will make it. So Lauren Brandon has been with us since the beginning. Cody Beals has been with us since the beginning. We've worked with, Jeannie Seymour the last few years, and Leslie Smith. All of these athletes have the capability. And so we just need to continue to support them and nurture them. And I think that a successful partnership isn't always dependent on a Kona finish. It's dependent on, how are they racing race after race after race? Lauren Brandon holding the record at Ironman Boulder. I mean, that will sit in all eternity now that Boulder's done. Cody has course records in Mont Tremblant. That's going to hold for a long time. We've had winners in Asia and South America, all over. And so as we look at it, it's one thing to put all of your eggs in one basket for Kona, but it's another to create meaningful relationships with our athletes and tell them, look, if you go out and win Kona, or if you go out and get a top 10 Kona, that does amazing things for our brand. It does amazing things for you as an athlete. It gives us a lot of collaborative efforts. But an athlete who can go out and win on 3 continents in a season is a completely other story to tell, and that's a story we want to tell. So when we begin to work with athletes, we don't sign them on with the intent to say, hey, here's how many social media posts you have to do a year, and here's how many guest appearances you have to do, or hey, we expected to see you at this race. We sit down with them multiple times a year and we say, okay, how are you doing? What do you feel like you're connecting with? Is it social media? Are you getting out and going to bike shops and giving talks and getting involved with community? Are you sitting at the local coffee shop and people are coming up to talk about your bike? How do we create your professional sponsorship surrounding the items that you personally connect with? So again, just going back into the whole Kona discussion, I'm not going to say who the athlete was, but I turned to an athlete at the airport in Hawaii who just arrived to do the race. And I asked them, I said, how are you feeling? What are you thinking? They go, I'm really nervous. I don't know how this is going to go. And I said, hey, it's okay if you don't win. It's okay if you don't podium. We want you to, but we love you all the more. And that's how this needs to go is, I absolutely want to see these athletes on the podium. We know they have the capability. We will see Ventum athletes in the top 10. But it's about the relationship again. And I can't stress that enough. And I know it's probably the 4th time I've said it over this interview. It goes through every single thing that we do is these athletes are part of building our business, and they're an important part of that. And the areas that they shine on are the areas that we're going to highlight. And when we get that top 10 in Kona, it's going to be everywhere.
So reviewing the Kona bike count for the last 5 years, and starting with 2015, you had 4, 22, 37, 49, and then 43. Elite age groupers are just as important in some senses as pros. How do you plan on getting, your bike into their hands?
It's not by giving them away. I'll tell you that.
I know that.
We focus on Kona as a whole. So we don't focus on the Kona bike count. We do have a Kona qualified program that we offer to anyone who's qualified. But the program isn't based around, here, if you ride your bike in Kona, you get this discount, or we're going to give you a frame set for free. There's so many different programs out there. We've invested a lot of time and effort in our partnership with Ironman that allows us to really highlight and grow the Kona experience. So for an athlete who is interested in going to Kona, it could be their 10th time, it could be their first time. It's going to be so different when you show up on the island and you unpack your bike and say you have a flat tire. We bring our entire mechanical staff to Kona. We set up in a big tent. We say, hey, let's do pre-race checkovers. All of our athletes' bikes. If you ride a Ventum, you come to us, we're going to take care of you all week long. We do group rides throughout the week. Last year, we did a CEO and Champions coffee with Andrew Messick, Cody Beals, Dia Noor, and it adds that extra layer of what makes Kona special and why people are there. So as we start to think about the Kona bike count, we don't look at it in terms of numbers. We look at it in terms of Kona as a whole, which is, did everyone who went to Kona notice that Ventum is growing bigger and bigger each year? And such a small portion of that is the Kona bike count. We can go out there and we can harass people to try and get on our bikes, but ultimately I don't want someone to ride my bike for a year and then move on to the next one. We like to see the same athletes coming back year after year after year with their Ventums and saying, oh, this is my 3rd time racing here, and here's how my results look. Would it be great to beat Cervelo in the Kona bike count? Absolutely. Do I see that happening without a major marketing cost? Absolutely not. So what we'd rather do is create a better experience for everybody instead of just the people who want to be on Ventum.
Okay. So I don't have any more questions, but I'd like to turn over the last few minutes if you want to use them for whatever you want to say.
I mean, I don't have too much to say here other than I just really appreciate you taking the time to reach out. Ventum has grown from a small boutique brand to kind of storming the triathlon world. We obviously still have our work cut out for us, and we're not going to give up on coming out with new technology. We are entering into the road scene. We're launching our gravel bike this coming summer. So in, 2 months. We're looking at really continuing to do what we've done in the triathlon world, which is community building, creating opportunities for performance, enhancing, the tech savvy of the world around us. We're looking to do that across the board, and we want to make sure that we're bringing those communities together. So I think, with the craziness of COVID-19 right now in the pandemic, we have to be very strong in saying, look, even if you identify as a triathlete, that doesn't mean that you can't be a gravel rider. And if you're a gravel rider, why can't you go out and do a triathlon or, stage your own? So as we keep going into kind of an uncertain future, I encourage people to try something new. I encourage people to ask questions and constantly continue to educate themselves. Um, and in the meantime, we're always open for a quick call, a conversation, or even just an email chain. So don't forget to shoot us a line at ventumracing.com.
Thank you, Rachel, for joining us. I appreciate it. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Thank you so much, Eric. I appreciate you having us.